So we're here for another morning interview, which we're excited about. And we met our next guest through Facebook. She reached out to us, heard about the podcast. And with no further ado, Ruth Bendig, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks.
Hi, Ruth.
guys.
Welcome.
How are you doing? Thank you. Good to see you. To put
Good to
faces
see you.
to put faces to the names and the voices is nice.
Yeah.
That's right. It's really
Yeah.
nice. And we're here with all of our dogs as well. So we'll like
Yes,
to
I
introduce-
see. I see that Sarah's dog just jumped off the bed.
Well, he's afraid of flies. That I just put two and two together. He's afraid of flies, so he's just gone under my feet at my desk. So.
Well, my dog is here. Apparently, if I keep my hands on her, we're good. So I'll be petting my dog, my emotional support dog, all the way through.
Perfect. That's perfect.
So
Well, we'll-
let's just
yeah.
jump in. Tell us your
Yep.
story.
All right. So I was adopted when I was placed with my adoptive family when I was 5.5 weeks old. Born in the early 60s in Wisconsin. I was in foster care for the 5.5 weeks prior to my placement. Spent a little bit of time in the hospital. In there, my foster father took me back to the hospital. So I was born, put in foster care, a week, 10 days in the hospital, back in foster care, and then placed with my adoptive family within the span of less than 2 months. And raised in an adoptive home. My parents had been trying for many years to have children and were not able to, and then ultimately adopted 3 of us, all from different biological families. We're not genetically related, within the span of 4 years. So they said it took which
Are
is
you
very
the
fast.
oldest? Are
I
you
am the oldest. Yes, I'm the oldest. And for the most part, just a very good, kind of solid Midwestern upbringing. Dad was a minister. Mom was home. She worked volunteer work. When I got to middle school, she started working in a job where she left the house. And it never really bothered me much that I was adopted. I mean, it was just kind of the way it was. I didn't know many other adoptees, but everyone in my parents' circle had known that they were looking to adopt children. And it was just, I never ran into any of this, like, you're the adopted kid stuff, right? Like nobody put that qualifier in front of daughter when I was growing up. My parents didn't, my extended family didn't, our community didn't. It wasn't until I actually left home. Well, there was one time in junior high, we moved from one state to another in junior high. And because I had never thought anything about being adopted other than it was kind of like a cool something about me that was special that other people didn't have. I was mentioning it to these new girls that I was meeting in my new junior high, and one of them called me a bastard.
Oh.
And for the one time in my life, I'm not usually really good at having retorts on the tip of my tongue, right? But I said, well, at least I knew my parents wanted me.
Yeah.
Which kind of cemented my social status in that school for a while, but it felt good in the moment. And it wasn't really until I got older that I started realizing that not everyone viewed adoption the way that my adoptive family does, right? And sorry, what was that?
Society.
Yeah, society at large. Yeah, and the thing is, the other thing that I think was my mother and father never hid the fact that we were adopted. Like, I don't remember ever being told that I was adopted. It was just the way our family was built. Right. There's this book called The Chosen Baby. Have you heard about that book?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a little cringy to read now because it feels a little bit like the Browns are shopping for a baby. They go, the social worker.
I think that's often the case.
Right. The social worker shows them a child and they say, oh, no, that's not our baby. And she shows them another child and yeah. I mean, and as an adult, that I look at that now from the perspective of 2022 and go, not so great. But at the time, it was kind of like I was a chosen baby, right? Like, I know my parents wanted me. They picked me, right? And
that's all the brainwashing of the early adoption stuff.
So, yeah, but it's also, my parents, again, another difference, I think. First of all, my father lost his father when he was 3. My adoptive father lost his father when he was 3. So he knew what it was like to lose a parent. And both of my parents, had known people who were adopted and found out late in life, right? We call them now late discovery adoptees.
Mhm.
Right.
And both of my parents had known people who found out late in life that they were adopted and who found it devastating. My mom said they said it was devastating. So they didn't want that to happen to us. So while mom was reading us this chosen baby, which was in constant rotation, I can still almost recite it, right? She would tell us about our birth parents. Like there was never a secret. And they always spoke about, especially the birth mother. Birth fathers are kind of never, the mother is more prominent in these stories always.
They're like
than
the side
father.
character.
Yeah, the father was like, he helped, but it's about the mother. So I knew things about her that a lot of adoptees didn't know. I knew more of my story than a lot of adoptees of my era, right? I come from the very closed adoption era. I think we're all kind of roughly the same age. I might be a little older than you, but it's
Yeah.
a very closed adoption era. But I knew that she was 18, that she had come from the West Coast and she'd gotten pregnant in high school and kept her pregnancy a secret. And that she came halfway across the country to keep her secret. And that she had given birth to me and gone back, and that my father was an artist and much older than she was, he was a graduate student, and that there was heart disease in the family and type 2 diabetes. So I had a little medical information. I had some kind of rough, I knew her father had died of a heart attack before I was born.
That's a lot for back then.
It is a lot, right? And so I didn't feel like I needed to search much because I had so much more than most people already, right? And then, I think as many of you, almost every single guest says, I started having my own children.
Yes.
Right? And my husband and I have 4 children. And I can't ask my mother what her pregnancies were like. I don't know what her deliveries were like. And my oldest son is born and, I have dark hair and dark eyes, and my husband and my boy has blonde hair and blue eyes. Where the heck did those come from? Right.
Yes.
And the joke is, of course, he looked very much like my adoptive father as a baby. And so people would say, oh, he got it from grandpa. Just blue eyes through osmosis. Yeah.
So you started having kids and you started getting curious?
I did, but I also, the other thing that was ingrained in me as part of that era is that I didn't necessarily have a right to more information, right? I already have a lot more than most people. And the idea that my surfacing and finding her would be disruptive and upsetting and not a good way to thank her for the gift of adoption was very ingrained in me. And so I did not want to, I was on a razor's edge for decades, really, for a very long time. I would really like to know more, but I also really don't want to upset her or do something that would hurt her.
Where do you think it was ingrained from? Was it family or just society? I was trying to think. I had that feeling too, and I don't know where.
I've been trying to think. I've been trying to figure that out. I think part of it is mostly society.
Mhm.
I think there was just sort of that was just the way it was.
Yeah.
There wasn't a challenging of it, right? It was just, there are some things we don't know in this life, and you can't know that. And there's no way to find it out. And, short of, people would say, well, don't you want to find your real parents? And I would say very indignantly, I know who my real parents are. They're the people who raised me. But there just wasn't a way to find out. So why waste a lot of energy worrying about it? I already have more than most people. I should be grateful for that. I was grateful. I felt like I should be, and I was indeed grateful for that. I actually had medical information, right? I knew that I knew there had been heart disease and diabetes in the family, which is more than a lot of people of my generation knew.
Didn't any part of you feel like this wasn't, that like biologically you were somebody else and that you wanted to know? Gosh.
Nope. I mean, I think.
Do you feel that way now?
Do I feel that way now? I've in some ways, yes, but really I look at it more like this is an addition as opposed to, I think also I am a lot like my adoptive mother. She and my birth mother have a lot in common. Genetically, they're from similar, you know, like my mother loved, my birth mother's father was a doctor, so was my mother's father. So they had a lot in common. And so I do wonder if the fact that I happen to be adopted by people who are similar to the people I genetically come from made a difference. You know, this is one of those things I don't know that we'll be able to parse out.
Right. Yeah.
But I also think for a lot of people, you start worrying about things and really kind of chewing on things when you're developmentally or emotionally ready to do so.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I just wasn't ready to think about that stuff. I had good parents. I get along with them. I had, I think, a good adoptive experience, as good as it can be under the circumstances. I had adoptive parents who in the 60s were aware that I would want and need and had a right to some information about my other family. They
I was
never
going to say, I
denied.
think that's actually pretty big.
Yeah, I
that
mean, they
part.
never denied that I came from other people, ever. There was, you know, and they always spoke about my birth parents with tremendous respect. There was never, so I think between those two things, it was easier for me just to accept it.
Mhm.
Right?
So I have a question. You have two siblings who are adopted.
Yes.
Did they, and it's not their story, obviously, but did
Yeah.
they have the same sort of feeling, do you think, or they sort of?
We all feel a little differently. We all feel differently. One brother, I have two younger brothers that are adopted. One was never really satisfied. The adoption really felt the adoption trauma more. Now, what I recognize now is adoption trauma more than any of the rest of us. The other wants nothing to do with it. He's happy with the family he has. He's done.
Yeah, he doesn't want to investigate at all.
Does not want to open that it is a Pandora's box. I mean, he's right. It's a Pandora's box when you start digging around. And you have to be ready to deal with whatever comes out, because once it's open, it can't be closed again.
Right. So that brings us to how did
how did I find out?
Yep. Well, yeah, the search part.
Well, I had, multiple children. By baby 3, I was starting to really appreciate more that it wasn't just this kind of, I'm very apparently a late bloomer. I don't know, but I like, how do you give this baby up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you say goodbye to this baby? Even though in the early 60s, there was not a social structure for her to be a single mother at 18.
No.
Right? Especially for a middle class girl in the 60s. I mean, I knew that she did likely did not have a social structure, but my image of her as, well, I'm pregnant. Okay, well, I will simply have to give the child up for adoption, because of course, abortion is not an option, right? It didn't start to really occur to me until I was a couple kids in before, like, oh, this might have really been bad for her.
It's a big wake-up call when you feel that way. It was
a huge wake-up call. Yeah, it was a huge wake-up call. And then I had my 4th baby, and right after she was born, the book The Girls Who Went Away came out. And I have a friend whose birth mother is one of the mothers whose oral history is in that book. So she mentioned it on Facebook, and so I got it and read it, and it was a huge smack in the face. Like, it just really drove home that these girls were not treated well. It was awful and traumatic and devastating. And I started really, like, if this had been me, I probably, because I was a good girl growing up, right? I was the good girl adoptee type of child, oldest and all that. I would have probably given my kid up, but I would have always wanted to know that my baby was okay and I had done the right thing.
Yeah.
Really would have needed that information for just my own peace of mind.
Right. So then
at that point, several years before that, I'm going to backtrack, back when my oldest was little. The state of Wisconsin, I was adopted out of Wisconsin. The state of Wisconsin instituted what they call their adoption record search program. And you can send away to the state, and they'll send you non-identifying information for a fee, of course. They will send you
for a fee.
non-identifying information. or if you want to try to do a search, they will track your birth parent down. And the rules, as I understand them, is that they will track the birth parent down. And if the birth parent, hello, pupper, if the birth
He's
parent,
having a hard time.
it's okay. Mine have given up and are asleep on the couch. If the birth parent doesn't want contact, they'll try again in a year. And if the birth parent still doesn't want contact, it's done. They
I
won't
think
try again.
it's shocking. I think you're the second person who's mentioned Wisconsin in this way. They're far more progressive than other states at that, in that time.
For that era, although they're
Yeah.
now behind because now
Now
many
they're
states
behind.
are opening their records and they're still not opening the records yet.
Yeah, like Colorado.
So I decided after, and so I'm sorry, I'm still back to when my oldest was little.
Right.
He was not even 1. My mother sent away for the paperwork. At the time, there was no internet. So she sent away for the paperwork. And I was at her house and she like showed up with the paperwork and said, in case you ever want to look, here's the paperwork.
Wow.
And at the time I was like, yeah, no, I'm not ready for this. I've got a 1-year-old, dad just had heart. I'm not ready for this, but I knew it was there. I had kept the paperwork. And so when my 4th child was born and I read The Girls Who Went Away, my husband had always been like, of course you want to look. Why wouldn't you want to look? You should be looking, I sent away for the non-identifying paperwork. And it came pretty quickly. And it confirmed a lot of what I knew and it added new information as well.
What kind of new information was on there?
I knew that now I knew she had siblings.
Oh.
That she was the middle of 3 children. I found out what state she was from. Well, I knew what state she was from. I knew what state she was from, but I thought she was from a different part of that state. So now I have now I know exactly more or less exactly where she's from. It confirmed that my birth father, one of the other things I had been told was that my birth father's mother had died in childbirth, and that was confirmed in the paperwork.
That's an interesting thing to have in the paperwork.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, I think that detail sticks with people, right?
Right, right.
So, and clearly he had told her at some point, right? I found out that she had just shown up at the state social work office one late summer day and said, I'm about to have a baby. She said she was 7 months pregnant. And she wanted to put the baby up for adoption. So because she was a minor at the time, remember at the time, 18 is a minor, they put her in foster care. And, as far as the state, and she was not telling them anything. What's in the paperwork is that she's really scared. The social worker even says, I'm not pressing her for details. If I try to get too much out of her and find out who her parents are, she's going to run away. So they were.
So this is in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And she's from
the West Coast.
The West Coast. So she just showed up on her own.
Yeah, and that was the other thing. Like, remember when I say my parents are talking, admiringly about my birth mother, this is this 18-year-old in 1962.
It's so brave.
Incredibly brave.
Yeah.
Incredibly brave. Like, I could not have done it. I just could not have done it. And probably on a bus, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
Pregnant, alone on a bus to a state where she said she had some family friends around that she could call on if she needed to, but she didn't want to reach out to them. It was incredible. She was kind of intimidating. I mean, reading about her in this paperwork, she's kind of intimidating. Right? That's a lot of self-possession.
Yeah, that is. So this is after your 4th child, you just got the non-identifying information.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And then what happened from there?
Well, and I also say, like, all of the adoption, the other things that happened in that paperwork, and some of this, like, I reread it occasionally and find new things. Like, again, when I'm developmentally ready, I find new things.
Right.
But like they mentioned that a sister had some struggles, and but we don't think it's anything that we need to mention to the adoptive parents. Like, oh. The social history is so good, we're telling them pretty much everything, like, which means that sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Little secrets.
Yeah. Lots of secrets all around. So then and I was happy with that information for a long time. Again, that's more than most people have. And it was more than I knew. But as my youngest child had a lot of health problems as a little one. And then my oldest child, one of my older children, developed epilepsy in high school. And suddenly the need for medical information is much greater.
Yeah.
Right. Like, there are different kinds of epilepsy, some that's caused by trauma, some that's organic. We didn't know what they had. We're just trying to, the medical information need started to overwhelm my desire to not open Pandora's box too much. Just to crack, I was happy just to crack it to here. But now
It doesn't really work that way though, does it?
It doesn't. Once you start opening, you just want to crank it open and dive in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I sent away for the identifying information. I talked about it with my husband and I sent away for the identifying information. And within a couple of weeks, I got a letter back from them telling me that she had falsified her last name and birth date, and that because of that, they could not find her. So now I'm like, well, if she falsified that, what else did she falsify? What do I actually know? Maybe all the stuff I thought I knew, I don't know. It's a mystery now. And I called the state and talked to the social worker, who said that there were some irregularities in the termination of parental rights hearing, which was interesting. And that there is no father named. In the place for the father is a thick black line.
What is the irregular? What does that mean?
I'm sorry, what mean?
What does that mean? The
I don't know. She
irregular
can be more
edits.
specific. She said they skipped steps.
Oh, they skip steps.
My guess is it has something to do with notifying the birth father.
Right.
I don't know, because I'm not allowed to look at my own documentation.
Right.
And she, knowing her, if she's secretive, she's probably not giving that information up to notify the birth father.
Right. My husband said, like, well, somebody knows somebody. The only way you get a court proceeding through with things that aren't regular like that is if somebody knows somebody. So we don't know who the family that she had in the Midwest was. Or the family or the friends. She said friends in the documentation. We don't know. And she did not give me a name. That was the other thing. I didn't have a name. So, okay. Well, that feels like a door that's just been slammed, right?
How'd you feel about that? Did you feel kind of
let down?
Yeah.
Let down. Like, I was ready. I felt like I was ready to take this step. It's a big, brave step, honestly.
It is.
To make that contact, right? It's really scary, because you don't know, you're opening yourself up to rejection.
Yeah.
You're opening yourself up to someone who wants more from you than you feel ready to give. It's a chasm, right? It's like you're about to step off a bridge into a chasm. And so I was already with one foot poised over the edge of the ledge, and I got yanked back. And that was disappointing. That was disappointing.
And so then what?
Okay, so then, I tucked it into a file drawer for a while, like a mental file drawer. And I have a friend who is really good at genetics. She does ancestry family trees. She does a lot of genetic research. And we were bored, and she kind of talked me into, my adoptive mother is from the South. Family connections are huge down there.
Oh, big.
And so I started building trees for my adoptive family.
From your adoptive family?
Yeah, they're my family, right?
Yeah.
But I have no way of knowing who the other people are. So if I'm going to build a tree, what other tree would I build, right?
Right.
And so I built one for mine. I built one for my husband's. These are my children's heritage as well. My son was very excited when we found a relative on my mother's side that would have gotten us membership into the DAR, or the Sons of the American Revolution. Right. And then we find out that they won't take you if you're adopted.
Mm-hmm.
It has
I know this.
Right. And it's like,
although I am actually genetically a DAR.
Yeah.
As it turns out.
Oh, are you?
Genetically, not adopted.
Yeah. No, like you're legit. I'm just a poser. Yeah.
I'm a poser too, and I'm not allowed to. I'm a little red box on there.
Yeah. Yeah. But I started doing it, and then I started seeing the ads for the DNA tests and started hearing more. My youngest child is 15 now. So when I'm talking about doing all this, it's like in the mid 2000s, and technology was catching up with me as time wore on, right? This all took place over decades. And so I finally, I sent away for the DNA test. I decided to I don't know, I was braver than I usually am. I just threw caution to the wind. And then it sat in the house for 6 months before I spit in the tube. do anything quickly. And then when the results came back, I opened it up and it's just wild. You go from
It's so
no
crazy.
genetic relationship to over 1,500 genetic relatives.
I get them
they were
every
all
day
dis-
still. I get
it's-
like cousins every day. It tells me. I just
Yeah, I just got one today.
Did you? Oh, they updated
That's-
the database. I'll have to go look.
No, just a third cousin.
Yeah,
I
well, they were
matched with a
all
third
distant,
cousin.
and they were all distant hits. That was the problem, though. Like, there was nothing closer than a third cousin.
Oh, you had all distant hits.
All distant, but there's thousands of them.
Wow.
So Kathleen, my friend that I was working with, teaching me the ways of genealogy, and I started building trees and moving my DNA around. And we were able to sort it into 2 distinct branches. So we didn't know which side was which parent, but we could tell that these people are not related to these people. And then about 6 years ago, was it 6 years ago? 4 years ago, 4 years ago. Yeah, 4 years ago, sorry. Time just, I woke up, I got a text at 6 a.m. from Kathleen, and she's like, you have a first cousin hit. And
Boom.
First
so
cousin on Ancestry can easily mean a sibling too.
it could, but this was actually a first cousin. This was actually a first cousin. It was under 1,000 centimorgans. So that, that's the end of that sleep. I come downstairs and I open it up and there she is. And
could you message her? Like, I have all
yes,
sorts
I
of weird
could,
stuff.
but I was not, I was like, okay, not sure I'm ready for this, right? Like on a
Right.
random Wednesday morning, am I ready for this?
Right.
I got everybody up and out, and then we talked about, Kathleen and I talked about it. Kathleen had done some work on it, and she pointed out that the cousin had linked an obituary to her tree, that she had a public tree and she had linked an obituary, and the obituary names everybody.
That's how I found a lot of things through an obituary too.
Oh, you know what?
The
Going
sons
forward,
of so and so and the married.
God
yeah.
bless the people who pay extra to put the genealogy in the obituaries, right? It's a God, they were a treasure trove. So rather quickly, and then also, I was not ready. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was like, what do I do? My brain just started spinning, right? Like that anxious kind of, and just take a breath. You don't have to do anything until you're ready. The illusion of control, like I'm going to have any control over this process.
And the crazy thing is they see you too.
Right.
That's always the weird thing to me, that everyone's sitting there waiting, sort of.
Right. And if I had been thinking, if I wanted to take it at my own pace, I should have hidden my results, but I didn't. And so during the day, we kind of sorted through the cousin's mother was an oldest child with a younger sister and a younger brother. Remember, my birth mother was a middle child. A lot of the details seem to fit possibly my mother's side of the family, but we didn't have any confirmation. And then that evening, the cousin sent me a message. And it turns out that she was also adopted a year before me, but she had found her birth mother's family. And so she knew who everybody was, but nobody knew there was another child.
Okay, so she was also adopted.
Yeah, a year before
so
me.
not raised by the family that you're looking for.
No.
But she's on Ancestry. I'm just getting it straight from my head. So she's
No,
on
I know it's
Ancestry.
confusing. Trust me, I
all
know.
this stuff's
There's a lot
confusing.
of people flying. It goes from like linear. I know. Yeah.
So she's kind of back in, let's say, the birth family. And do they know
She is
about
on
her?
Yes.
Yeah, she
Pardon?
just said, yeah, they know.
Oh, they know about her.
She found
Okay, sorry.
She had found her birth mother several years earlier, but nobody had ever mentioned there being another child that was put up for adoption. So
Gotcha. Yeah, we're up to speed.
I was still a secret. So she reached out to her sister that was raised in the family, who called. And at this point, it's Ancestry. People think they've hidden themselves, and there's public record all over the place. And I had figured out that the middle sibling, the sister, could likely be my birth mother by dates, basically. And she was born in the same state as my birth mother. And but the cousin called her aunt, the cousin that was raised in the family called her aunt. She's very excited. She's like, oh, a new kid, someone new in the family. This is awesome, right? And the aunt was like, I am not going to talk about that. Don't ever mention it again. Click.
Yeah.
Done. And so, you know, that in a way confirms that she very likely is my birth mother, right?
Sounds like it.
Yeah, it does. And
I'm guessing it was, by the way you're telling the story.
well, I mean, I'm guessing. I still have not spoken ever. She's still, I don't have any contact with her.
Oh, okay. So, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
No
It
contact.
turns out that I'm not quite the secret that she thinks I am. People in the family, some other people in the family had known for a long time. I have 2 half brothers who had known about another baby for some time, and they and I have met them.
How did they know about you?
From my understanding, her husband told his mother, who told the children, I think. Which I don't think.
So
was
their
the case.
grandmother knows.
Their
is what-
grandmother told them.
Okay.
I have some opinions about that.
I was going to say that's very boundary crossing, but okay.
Yeah, I think that's, I think they had a right to know that they had a sibling. I don't think it
Yes.
was her place to tell them.
Yeah.
Right. That's, I mean, I'm glad that I was not a complete shock to them, but I don't think it was her place to tell them.
Well, kind of usurping their mother. It's so strange.
Yeah, I know. I think that I think it's complicated. I think the family relationships are complicated.
Families are weird anyway.
Families
they
are
just-
weird, adopted, biological. I think they're all just, they all have their stuff, you know. And so then I knew that I had this one cousin who was raised in the family who did not see any point in any of the secrecy. And
I tend to be on that side of things too.
yeah, I think so. I think I have a weird, I think that you, at least in my personal moral universe, at least I wanted to reach out to my birth mother and be say, here I am, before going around her to other family members.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I
Right.
get that. I just think I just think all the secrets and, it's
Oh,
your
absolutely.
right. Maybe you don't want to meet, you don't want to, but it's not your right to keep it secret from.
I completely
Yes.
agree. Nope, I
That's what I
completely agree
feel.
with you. And I think
Yeah.
secrets are toxic.
Mhm.
Right. And I think
Yeah.
this, especially the secret that's born of moral ethos and family drama from 56, almost 60 years ago,
Mhm.
nobody cares anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Sunlight is a disinfectant. Bring it out. Maybe it'll be healing, but you can't force people to do that.
Right.
And, honestly, she's in her, I don't even, how old is she now? Late 70s. She's old. Is it a kindness to force an old woman who doesn't want to face something to face it? If she's not ready, it's probably not.
She probably won't ever. Yeah.
It's just not worth, again, if I'm going to go back to what I really don't want to do in this whole process is traumatize anybody, then it's not worth forcing this. It's just
So
not.
how many years has it been? It's been 4 years since you've
Since
reached
I
out to her?
figured out who she was. Yeah.
And did you send her a message or?
I did eventually. Yes.
Okay.
I did eventually send her a message with some pictures of my family, and got no response. I debated whether you should send it. Some people say send it registered mail so they got it, but
Yeah.
But
I
so
might
you've
send her
talked
another
to your-
letter at some point, but
I mean, you
right,
might, yeah.
I might,
Maybe one day she'll.
Kinda
What,
like the
but
state of
you've met
Wisconsin, give them a second chance,
you've met half siblings, her
Yes. I have.
children?
Mhm. Yeah, just once. They live far away.
And did
And
that
how-
It's
go
fine.
well?
We're in communication. It's fine. I mean, it's hard to develop relationships as adults. When you live a long way away, it's hard to develop relationships over a distance. And then there's the guy-woman thing,
The
it's
what?
just, but just, men, they're two
Mm.
brothers, and they just, I don't know that they think to reach out. I don't know. In my family, I do most of the social reaching out, and my husband's never
I was going to
unhappy about
say,
it,
my
but-
husband never reaches out to anybody. It is a male thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, no, we're fine.
We're going to get crucified by a younger generation who says
Oh,
to
probably.
stop
Oh, my son
gender assigning. And I think
I
they're
am-
right. I think we
They are
shouldn't
right.
just
yeah, they're going to
assume.
yeah, but I'm an old, we're raised. so, you know, a
I
couple
was
years
always a
ago,
millennial in a Gen X body, I have to say.
well, you know, and hopefully I've raised my sons not to be that way. I mean, I've tried not, I've
Right,
tried
that's
to
the
encourage,
point.
trying to make an affect change with the next generation, right?
Right.
So a couple of years after that, I decided that, you know, I gave her about a year after the letter to say, to reach out. She didn't. I'm like, well, I'm not going to get anything more out of her. So back to the DNA and let's see if we can figure out who the birth father is. And we went back and we started looking, and part of the problem is that that side of the family get married multiple times and have 4 to 6 to 8 kids with each spouse. So there's tons of people to wade through. But we eventually were able to, what we thought was pinpoint a couple where the 2 branches of the tree met. But they had they only had 2 children. But one of them was the wrong age to be my father and had never been in the state where my birth mother lived. And the other disappeared off the record after when they were 3 years old. Like they're in the 1910 census and then they're lost they're gone. So back in the day, they like death records weren't required by states often until like the 1920s. It's entirely possible this child died and just it never made it into public record, but we can't find any traces of this kid anywhere. So again, we've hit a brick wall and I have to decide how badly I want this information. So
Yes.
you guys know about search angels?
No.
A search angel is a hobbyist who does genetic genealogy generally for no fee. You can find them through DNA search angel groups on Facebook. And you have to give them access to all your records, but they will do DNA painter and they will do record, and they can try to help you pinpoint your genetic relatives. So
Did you know about that, Sarah? I've never heard of that,
Didn't,
actually.
no.
Yeah, DNA search angels. Yeah. So I decided that I would like to figure this out if I could. I like to put a bow on the mystery, not enough to pay for it, but if someone was willing to do the research for free, I'd be happy to do it. You know, that would be fine. And then I did Ancestry. I also sent my DNA to 23andMe. I figured I would just cover all my bases. And a relative from 23andMe reached out, turns out also adopted, and they're clearly on the father's side. So at that point, I couldn't really help them. But they gave me the name of the search angel that they'd worked with. So I reached out to this person because it's a lot of personal information to be trusting a random stranger with. And he took 10 days to agree with us that this is the couple that we need to be looking at. But again, he agreed that the children don't line up. The one kid definitely disappears. The other guy is definitely not the right person. So we're thinking, well, there's another adoptee out there somewhere. Someone else had a baby out of wedlock, something. And the search angel says, well, have you seen this family genealogy online? I'm like, what? The family historian had put up a huge multiple page family record story of the family online. And it mentions these people that we are assuming are my great grandparents.
Where would you see that? Just it's on like a private site, or?
No, I think it's publicly available. I think the search angel Googled the names and found it. It just had not occurred to me to just do a random Google search on the grandparents' names. Or if I had missed it in the.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So I went and looked at it. He sent me the section that referenced the people we are assuming are my great grandparents. And in it, you know, old newspapers used to like publish when someone would go on vacation and come home, or they went and had dinner at somebody's house. And it mentions that the grandmother and her daughter had just returned from a trip. And I said, wait a minute, their daughter, who's the daughter? And he said, I don't know, ask the family historian. So I reached out to the family historian and he said, no, they only had 2 children. They had a boy and a girl. And I said, but the 1910 census says that the name is wrong. Ultimately, to cut to the chase, the name is wrong on the 1910 census. It's a boy and a girl, not 2 boys.
Not 2 boys.
The boy that disappears after the 1910 that disappears because he never really existed. They got the name wrong. Like, Alvin instead of Alma. Right?
Yeah, gotcha.
So once I searched for the girl's name, so now I put the girl's name into Ancestry. And within 10 minutes, I had found my birth father.
Wow.
10 minutes.
It was just boom. She had married, she's exactly the right age. She got married. She died the day after the birth of her second child. Her husband had then moved the family to the same area where my birth mother lived. They grew up in the same part of the country.
Which you strangely knew from your other information.
Right. And then when I Googled his name, I found his wedding announcement, which confirmed that he was an artist who was a graduate student at an art school in this area, and also confirmed that he was married.
Well, that's not unusual. People
No,
are often went on to get married.
no, it's not. And it would explain how an older, but we also found out is that he was my.
Oh, he was married when he got her pregnant.
Yes.
Oh,
he was her teacher.
He was her, that's what I was gonna say. He
Oh.
must have been her professor.
He was her teacher.
Or teacher.
Wow.
Yeah.
He was her teacher.
How many years age difference was there?
10.
10 years.
10 or 12, somewhere in there. I'd have to look up the
Did
exact date.
so did you reach out to him?
He's dead. He died right
Oh.
about the time I started searching in earnest, right around, he
that
died shortly before my fourth child was born.
And-
But the search angel also, now this will get this. So the search angel sends me a picture and says, this is your sister. Here's your biological sister, because he and his wife had a 5-month-old baby at home when I was conceived.
When you were conceived.
Right. And the sister
That rat bastard.
the sister is someone I've known for 20 years.
The sister what?
Oh,
Is
no.
someone I've known for 20 years.
Come
What?
on. In
Our
your
boys-
community?
Our oldest children went to preschool together.
That could be like Sarah and I.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. So our kids went to, we were born in the same state, but then I had moved. I grew up actually in Iowa, not Wisconsin. Part of my childhood was in Iowa, Wisconsin part was in Iowa. She was from Wisconsin, and then we ultimately both moved to the same city and put our oldest children in the same preschool.
So I just
Wait,
want
I'm
to know
totally
that you get this picture. Are you like, that's my friend from
Oh yeah,
That
no, and yeah, I was just, that same kind of brain spinning, like my brain doesn't even know how to process this, that you just kind of fuzz out for a minute. Yeah.
I'm just
And
Wait,
picturing
hold on. I'm confused.
Yeah.
it.
Your
No, it's
birth
a lot.
mother got on a bus and came to Wisconsin
Yes, from the
So-
West Coast.
from the West Coast. So she got pregnant on the West Coast with.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did his daughter end up in Wisconsin?
Well, so I started sending, now, when I sent a letter, I found that his sister had a child who is older than me. And she turns out to live not far from me now in New England. And I sent her a letter. And it sounds like, I mean, I again, without my birth mother talking to me, I just have to sort of figure out the story that makes the details make sense, right? It sounds like right about the time she may have told him she was pregnant, he picked up the family and moved them to Wisconsin. So he ran away.
Where you were born. She
Yeah.
told him where you were born.
She followed him.
Oh,
She must have followed him.
him.
I'm guessing she
must-
followed him.
Oh, so she got pregnant in Wisconsin. it
No,
sounds like.
no, she got pregnant during the
confused.
beginning of her senior year in high school.
So I'm thinking that she fell
Oh, he
with
was
some
her high school art teacher.
high school
Wow.
art teacher. Very scandalous. I'm
Yeah.
Very
thinking,
scandalous. Oh, so
I'm
scandalous.
thinking she comes to Wisconsin. That's the family friend if there's an emergency,
I think so. I
because
think so.
he knows she's pregnant.
Right. I mean, my guess is that, again, I don't know, but my guess
Yeah.
is she was hoping he would help make it right somehow,
I
right?
can understand why she's full of all this.
Can't you, I mean, the more
The
I hear about
trauma.
this, it's like, why would I open this up, right? This is not, unless she's ready to deal with this, and this is a lot to expect somebody
It
to
would be
process.
nice though to know your history and your story
would.
and
It
what happened.
would.
but,
Do you guys,
um,
so you guys know the term ambiguous loss?
mhm,
Yeah.
This is ambiguous loss.
yeah.
I'm never gonna know unless she changes her mind. because I have, you know, in talking to my half siblings, they don't know all of the stuff that like, they don't know the extent of this. They thought he was a fellow high school classmate.
So your
Oh.
sister slash friend,
Yeah.
was she shocked when you told her?
Yes. Yes.
Hey, Sarah, guess what?
Yeah, quite.
I just think that's kind of cool. I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, well, and we had, you know, I had moved away from the town, from where we'd been living, and we'd been in touch. We had reconnected through knitting, of all things. We're both obsessive knitters. And so I reached out to her through a knitting community website and said, so I'm looking for information about this person who's on this tree that your husband is maintaining. And she's like, oh, I'll have him get in touch with you. Like, okay, not quite hearing what I'm saying. Like, I'm looking for someone, I think you and I are connected. And turns out that our birth father was not the greatest guy.
I was going to say he's getting around a little.
He was getting around, and he just not the greatest guy. And her mother had eventually divorced him too. And
now, did her mother know about your birth? Or you don't know? I have sort of a similar situation, is why I'm asking. So it's,
yeah,
you know.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. Yeah. She sounds like an awesome woman. She was, I think, smart as a whip.
So she's no longer alive?
No.
That's the thing.
And so is your half sister like happy to have you as a sibling? Are
Yes.
there other siblings?
There is another sibling who is not ready to.
And that's her full sibling?
Yes.
Okay.
And
she's happy and welcomed, like embraced you as a sister?
Oh yeah. We chat, text all the time, and get together over Zoom and knit together and talk. And when I'm in town, I see her, and yeah, it's good actually. Yeah. All my life, I wanted a sister. I always wanted a sister. Always. It sometimes makes me wonder, like these things they say babies know, if I'm letting myself get into the you know, let my fertile imagination. Did I know, did my birth mother know that there was a sister for me out there? And did I somehow know that I have it? Because I've always wanted a sister, like really wanted a sister. And now I have several. So, because the other thing I did, I found birth father had a third child, well, fourth. And I've made contact with her as well, but we're kind of all scattered all over the country. So and then there was this pandemic. So we haven't been able to meet. Yeah.
Well,
your story is just blowing my mind a little bit. I'm like, wow,
it's kind of wild, huh? Yeah.
It's a normal journey. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, how's all this in Wisconsin going on? Like,
yeah, Wisconsin of all places. Wisconsin's not usually.
Where do you live now?
I'm in New England. I'm outside Boston.
Oh, okay.
We lived in Illinois, and then my husband got a job out here. We've been out here for a long time.
My biological family is in New Hampshire and upstate New York. My bio father's family is in New Hampshire. And then,
it turns out my genetic family, my bio family looks like they came into the country through Canada.
Same with mine.
And then it trickled down through New Hampshire, Vermont, right?
Same with
mine. And then they migrated to the Midwest. I started poking around. It turns out I'm distantly related to one of my I don't even know how many times great grandfathers was one of the early Mormon settlers, was one of the people that was arrested with Joseph Smith in Missouri. Like,
wow.
I know. I'm a good Presbyterian. I'm a Presbyterian, but that's kind of like, okay. You know, my father was a Presbyterian minister. My adoptive father was a Presbyterian minister. So, so kind of where we stand is that I have to decide if I'm going to reach out to my birth mother again, or if it's just kinder just to let it go. I think it might just be kinder to let it go at this point.
Maybe she'll come across this podcast randomly, happenstance.
Maybe. Maybe. You know, and when we talk about like genetic mirroring, right?
Yes.
When I saw her picture, I don't look anything like her, really. I don't think. So, you know, I saw all my life, one of the things about having my own children was like someone who's going to look like me. Right.
Right.
And then I don't really see myself in their faces. I see their father a lot. And I don't think I look very much like my biological mother. My oldest daughter looks a lot like her mother. Like, it's scary.
It can
And
also be
then
mannerisms and just these little.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, but you also learn mannerisms from your adoptive family, don't you
You
think?
do,
I think,
yeah.
like this thing I'm doing right here, this is my adoptive father. This is what he does when he's thinking, this thing.
I mirror more my biological family. That was the one thing my ex, when he saw all of us together, he was like, oh my God, everything you do is the
I
same.
have that.
I
Yeah.
look a lot like my biological father. When we saw his picture, we're like, oh, there you go.
And do you look like your friend who's now your sister?
Yes, I do. I do. Another friend, I sent a picture to another friend and said, oh my God, she's my sister. And her son looked at it and said, how did they not know?
How did they? That's what I
So
was
funny.
wondering.
You'll have to send us a picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, send us
Love
privately
to
a
see
picture.
it.
Privately, I'll send you. Yeah.
Yeah, not for us to post. I just
Yeah,
mean we'd love to
please.
see it. Well, this has just been really great. And I can't wait to hear what you decide next and what happens next. Will you keep us posted?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun talking to you.
Yeah, really great.
Yeah.
Like full of surprises.
Yes, it's been quite a journey.
Yes.
Yeah, it has. All right.
Well, Ruth, thank you. And keep coming to things too, because you were on our Facebook Live. I remember.
Yes, I know. I do. I know. Well, my daughter has dance class from 7 to 8 on Wednesdays. It's perfect.
I love it. I love it.
So I sit out in the car and watch the lives.
This has just been great. Thank you.
Yeah.
For sharing
Thank you
it.
so much, Ruth. So
You're
nice
welcome.
to have you.
Yep. Thanks for having
Talk
me.
to you
Bye.
soon.
Yeah.
Okay,
Bye.
Bye.
There we go.
Louise.